Well, welcome everyone. I want to welcome you to the Tippie Women's Summit webinar series. Thank you so much for joining us today for our discussion on women in STEM. And so I want to introduce myself. My name is Barb Thomas. I oversee communications and alumni relations here at the Tippie College of Business. And for those of you that may not be familiar with the Tippie Women's Summit, normally this is a one-day event where we are all together in person, but like everyone, we have had to pivot and do something different. And so this year, we are actually presenting the Tippie Women's Summit in a series of different events every week in the month of March. So I do want to make sure that you're aware that we do have other opportunities for you to participate. So here on the screen, you'll see listed that we have 3 other events yet in the month of March for the Tippie Women's Summit. We have the Pandemic and Mental Health, which will be held on March 18th. Women on Corporate Boards, that will again be a panel discussion on March 24th. And then Women Who Shaped the University of Iowa on March 31st. And that will actually feature a University of Iowa librarian who will talk about information from the University Library archives. In addition, I want to make sure that you're aware that we do have one more Tippie career webinar slated for the end of the month. On March 30th, we will have Dee Hurst, who will be talking about making your case, preparing for the salary negotiation. So with that, I just want to give you a few little housekeeping items before we start. So you may notice that at the bottom of your screen, you may be seeing words. So we have activated the live transcription feature for our hearing impaired participants. However, if you don't want to see that, you do have the option. You can simply go to the More button underneath, and you could select hide subtitles or hide captions. In addition, if you look at subtitle settings, it would give you the option to potentially make those titles larger if you would like. Now we're in an actual Zoom webinar compared to a Zoom meeting, so things are just a little bit different. If you go to the chat, you'll notice that you can actually send a chat message to all panelists or to all panelists and everyone, but you don't have the ability to chat with each other privately. But we do have separately a Q&A button, and that is where we would encourage you to enter your questions. So if you can, please don't put your questions in the chat, put your questions in the Q&A area. Just click on that, type in your question, hit enter, and then we will try to get to all of these as much as we can within the time period. Know that we probably will not be able to get to all of them, but we will do our best. In addition, I do want to make sure that you know that the live transcriptions that you're seeing are auto-generated, which means we're not really sure if they're going to understand everything that we're saying. So cross our fingers that that is accurate and that all transcriptions are only available in English. And so with that, I would like to introduce you to Amy Kristoff-Brown. So she is the new dean of the Tippie College of Business. She has been with the Tippie College of Business for some time, but she is a highly respected researcher and an award-winning faculty member, and she has been serving as dean since December 1st. She had the lucky job of coming in as interim dean. Guess when? March 1st, 2020. So that girl has had no work at all. Let me tell you, she jumped into this role and she has taken it all in stride. So I want to turn it over now to Amy Kristoff-Brown. Amy?
Thanks so much, Barb. It has been a wonderful ride since March 1st of last year, working in a college of people who are just dedicated to continuing to help students and organizations reach their dreams and reach their goals. So it's really been my pleasure. And it is also my pleasure today to introduce you to our moderator, Dr. Jen Blackhurst. Jen is the Leonard A. Hadley Professor of Business Analytics in the Tippie College of Business. She's also our new Associate Dean for our Graduate Management programs. So anyone who is in our evening MBA program or our online MBA program, or our executive MBA program, or one of our many master's programs, such as Masters of Business Analytics or Masters of Finance. You will get to know Jen. She is doing a lot of great things behind the scenes to make sure that these degree programs continue to give students what they're looking for, and employers the right types of employees that can help them accomplish their goals. Jen is a woman of STEM herself. Her research focuses on supply chain, and her work has appeared in many of the highest prestige outlets, including places like the Journal of Operations Management and Decision Sciences. She's a member of the Council for Supply Chain Management Professionals and the Decision Sciences Institute. So she is a perfect person to guide us through our conversation today. And I will hand it over now to Jen, who will introduce you to our three very esteemed panelists. Thank you for being here. And I turn it over to you, Jen.
Thank you so much, Amy. I just want to say I'm really incredibly proud of the work that we're doing here at the Tippie College of Business, not only developing future business leaders, but in particular, our strategic focus on fostering, growing, and really illustrating the immense power of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This includes developing women as leaders and teaching them skills to pursue their passions, developing pathways for women in STEM, in particular in our analytics and finance programs here at the Tippie College of Business, is key to our effort. As Amy mentioned, I'm also a woman in STEM. I have an engineering background. And before we get started with the panelists, I just wanted to share a small bit of information that really, I think, illustrates why I'm so excited to be a part of the panel. So I've had a long career in industry and then in academics. But before I arrived here at the Tippie College of Business, I had never had a woman leader anywhere in my career. This includes in industry as well as a number of institutions of higher education. So coming here to Tippie, where I am surrounded by strong women leaders that allow me to pursue my passions, has just been a real gift to me. I also was remembering thinking back to all of my classes as an engineering student. I never had a woman professor. So to be able to highlight the power of women in STEM and give you a glimpse into some of the careers of our outstanding panel is just a real pleasure. So with that being said, I am very honored to introduce our panel today. And we're really joined by three dynamic and amazing women. Jennifer Marietta-Westburg is a principal at Cornerstone Research. Ebony Johnson is a trait discovery project manager at Corteva Agriscience. And Eden Simmer is the head of global trade equity at PIMCO. I'd like to start by introducing each of our panelists in a little bit more detail, and then asking them to tell us a little bit more about themselves, their roles, and the insights that they're going to provide today. Let's begin with Jennifer Marietta-Westburg, who is the principal with Cornerstone Research. She consults on economic and financial issues arising in litigation and regulatory investigations in financial market. She has served as an expert witness in a number of cases. She is the chair of the Investor Advisory Council of the Securities and Exchange Commission, which offers guidance to the Commission on regulatory priorities and initiatives to support the integrity of the securities marketplace. She worked for 10 years at the SEC and served as the Deputy Chief Economist and Deputy Director of the Division of Economic and Risk Analysis from 2013 to 2016. Prior to joining the SEC, she was an assistant professor at Michigan State University, and her research has appeared in a number of publications, including the Journal of Accounting and Economics and the Journal of Corporate Finance. She received her PhD in economics from the University of Iowa's Tippie College of Business. So Jennifer, as we start with you, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and why the issue of women in STEM fields really resonates and is important to you?
Sure. Thank you for that introduction, Jen. Very happy to be here today, and I just think this is a great topic. So I will start out with a few anecdotes that are similar to yours, Jen. So I actually was originally studying for my PhD in math at the University of Iowa. I decided to pursue that path because I thought math was a very beautiful subject, and not necessarily because I had researched whether there were opportunities as math professors. There were not a lot of opportunities, and the pay was actually very low. I found out into the program. So I became aware of another very mathematically inclined degree, which was a PhD in finance, and ended up switching to that program at the Tippie College of Business. And I was the only female PhD student, I think actually for every year that I was there. And there were no female faculty except for my last year in the PhD program. Now that's changed. I'm happy to say there are more women in the finance department now, which is great. Then my first job as an assistant professor at Michigan State University, there were also no female faculty when I joined. So I had a similar experience to yours. I very much enjoyed my time at both universities, but I'm really glad to see that this is, at least probably slowly, but it is changing. And I know that from my experience in academics and then my experience at the SEC and at Cornerstone, trying to get more women into economics and finance is something that all of those institutions are doing. There's just not always a lot of women in the pipeline. And so that's something I'm hoping we can help rectify through talks like this. So in thinking about the importance of women in STEM fields and what women have to offer, I think, first of all, we're very well trained. We have a lot to offer. And if you have an interest in this field, I think that we want to have our voices as part of the discussions around cutting edge innovation that's affecting all of us, whether it's in medicine or finance or other fields. What we've seen in the last year with the global pandemic, the search for vaccines at the forefront of medicine, the technologies we need to work from home, how we care for our families. Really, I think we want our voices to be at the center of those conversations. Many of them require technical, engineering, mathematical backgrounds. So I'll start with that as my brief introduction, and then happy to add on later.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next, I'd like to turn our direction to Ebony Johnson, who's a research project manager in trait discovery with the R&D program management for Corteva Agriscience. She joined Corteva's genetics disease resistance team. That sounds like an exciting team in 2002, where her early career focused on the identification, molecular characterizations, and validation of resistance genes with activity against high value crop diseases. She spent several years managing a transgenic trait pipeline and joined the Trait Discovery PMO in early 2020. Prior to her work at Corteva, Ebony held positions as a neurobiology research for the U.S. Department of Defense, an adjunct microbiology and biotechnology instructor for Delaware Tech, and she served as a combat medic and medical supply logistics specialist in the United States Army. She is the recent recipient of the Black Engineer of the Year Outstanding Achievement Award and was recognized as a modern day technology leader at the 2021 BEYA Global STEM Conference. Ebony holds a BS in microbiology, an MS in biotechnology from the University of Maryland, and congratulations, she's going to be graduating in May of 2021 with her MBA from the Tippie College of Business with a leadership focus. So welcome, Ebony. Can you expand on your role at Corteva and what originally drew you to a career in STEM? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Thanks so much, Jen. I'm really excited to be here today, and I just want to thank you all for inviting me to join the panel today. And I think I'll start from the beginning. You know, I've always really had a passion for life sciences. And, you know, I was the kid who was out collecting specimens to take home to study, even starting at a very young age. And so science is just something that I've really always been drawn to. And there were certainly also role models in my life that, you know, I learned about in school that helped me to shape who I was going to become. And I was really always drawn to the story of Rosalind Franklin, who provided invaluable insights into the structure of the DNA double helix. But she was, you know, largely overlooked for her in terms of credit for her contributions. And so her story, for some reason, really inspired me and resonated with me and inspired me when I was young to want to become a scientist someday. And, you know, I initially wanted to study brain cancer. That's the type of scientist I had decided as when I was young that I wanted to be. And I did work in a neurobiology lab for a while earlier on in my career, but my career ultimately transitioned into agriculture. And so now I work for Corteva, which is a pure play agriculture company. And there I work as a project manager now in trait discovery R&D. And so I spent the majority of my career conducting research, as you specified, to identify and characterize genes that can confer beneficial traits to crops. And I did this for a number of years. I really loved and enjoyed working in having a career in the lab. But I decided it was time for a change, and I transitioned out of the lab beginning of last year. And so now I use my scientific background and the business skills that I've been using here at Tippie in my MBA program to manage trait discovery projects instead. And so I think that I've thrived at Corteva because I really believe that I'm using my skills and my STEM background to help farmers to feed the world. And that is just such a strong personal driver for me. And so with that, that's my background, and I hope I answered your question.
Wonderful. Yeah, we're so excited to have you be a part of the panel and soon to join the ranks of a Tippie alum. So thank you very much. Finally, I'd like to introduce Eden Simmer, who is an executive vice president and equity trader in the New York office at PIMCO. Prior to joining PIMCO in 2010, she was a trader focusing on equities, foreign exchange, and preferred securities for the Deutsche Bank Asset Management. Previously, Ms. Simmer was a foreign exchange trading associate at ABN AMRO. She has 15 years of investment experience and holds an MBA from Columbia Business School and undergraduate degrees in finance and economics, as well as an international business certificate from the University of Iowa. Welcome, Eden. Can you tell us a little bit more about your role and really how you forged this very interesting and dynamic career path?
No, so thank you. First, I have to say that my time at the University of Iowa was crucial in setting me on my career path and where I am now. And I just wanted to add to the current prospective students that, you know, enjoy your time while you have it there. You know, take advantage of all the resources that the College of Business and University of Iowa has available to you. In all honesty, I started out as, you know, I grew up in Iowa. Went to the University of Iowa. So being in finance was something that I wasn't sure what was open and available to me. And, you know, as I learned through the University of Iowa, I participated in about 5 different internships. And through those 5 internships, it really just opened up the world of finance and what career opportunities were out there. And it also taught me a really important lesson, which is finding out what I didn't want to do is just as important as figuring out what you do want to do. And so, you know, when you're that age and, you know, the world is rather small and narrow and you don't have any frame of reference to go off of, you know, you realize I don't like cubicles or I don't like hour-long meetings where nothing really gets decided, although, you know, in any profession, you're not going to get away from those, unfortunately. But it's really something where, you know, at the University of Iowa, it afforded me the opportunity of trial and error to figure that out and really, you know, sort of test case myself there. And really, I think ignorance is bliss as well. You know, as, you know, Jen, you said, and Jennifer had indicated before, you didn't see many men in your fields. You didn't, you know, women in your fields, it was primarily men. You didn't see any women leaders. it really was that ignorance and that lack of frame of reference that got me into trading, because I didn't know any better. Like, I didn't know women couldn't be traders. And so, you know, through that career path, I found a career that suited my personality. It suited my skill set. I wouldn't say that the markets were a passion for me when I entered into trading, but being financially independent was a passion of mine and a goal of mine. And the work was very interesting. And as I developed in the career and got more expertise and learned more about the markets, I really found a passion. And that passion was noticing the lack of women in my industry on my trade desks, and thinking and brainstorming, what is it that I can do as an individual? What can I do to rectify that? Or what can I do to advocate for more women? Or how do we advocate for ourselves? And it was really by making mistake after mistake after mistake, you know, it's really workshopped me up into the career and the role that I'm in now. And so now I head up the global equity trade desk for PIMCO. PIMCO manages $2 trillion in assets under management currently. I think that was the last statistic. Hope I'm quoting that correctly. And on my trade desk, we trade Asia, we trade Americas, we trade Europe, we trade developed markets, we trade emerging markets, we trade all equity products under the equity asset class umbrella. Great to see Jennifer, you know, and her work on the Securities and Exchange Commission. We work, you know, closely with them as an industry, you know, leader to really try to figure out how we can make, you know, our clients and markets more efficient. And so with that, through that, you know, all of that possibility, all of that career path never would have happened if I hadn't gone through, you know, 4 internships that I knew exactly what I didn't want to do, or things that, you know, I knew that I probably wouldn't be that great at, to put me on the path to where I am now. And really through that, I've been able to find, again, my passion, which is promoting more gender equality, you know, being, you know, and representing myself on panels so that people can see that, you know, traders don't have to look a certain way, AKA male, you know, to be successful, that you can also be a woman and be in leadership roles and be senior and be in this field.
Thank you, Eden. I'm going to now turn my attention back to Jennifer and just talk to you a little bit about some of the research that we did in prepping for this interview. In an analysis by Equilar of the 5 highest paid positions at companies in the Russell 3000 index within finance, banking has made the most progress, with women accounting for 26 of the top highest paid positions in that subgroup, and that's up from 11% in 2010. However, we can juxtapose that with a different report by Bank of America that stated that only 5% of S&P 500 companies had a woman at the helm, and corporate executive committees are actually less diverse in 2019 than in 2018. In your opinion, what are some of the challenges that women are facing today, and how can we navigate and overcome these challenges?
Well, those studies are so interesting to see. Obviously, I can speak to my experience and what I've seen along the way, but one study provides hope, another one brings more questions up. I think we have more to study to really understand these trends. As I mentioned earlier, I'd started out studying finance. There are wonderful experience, not a lot of women though, at both universities I was at. I decided that I wanted to spend a year away from academia and just see a little bit of how my research could be applied to the financial markets, which is how I ended up at the SEC. And one thing that I noticed that was different there right away is there were many more women. The SEC has a lot of attorneys, a lot of accountants, and there tended to be a higher percentage of women in those fields at the SEC, and then also in the economics unit, more so than I had seen in academia. And I didn't expect to feel this way, but I would say that it was nice to have a mix of colleagues like that. And then when I left the SEC and came to Cornerstone, actually 2 of our 3 founders at Cornerstone were women, and we were founded approximately 30 years ago. of our office heads and our partners in Cornerstone are around 45% women. So I think we're really one of the leaders when it comes to women in leadership positions in the industry. But it is difficult, as I mentioned, because particularly in my field where you're looking for candidates with PhDs in finance and economics, we don't necessarily have a lot of women entering those programs. So I think that is one of the first challenges, is finding women who are interested. We don't want to push women into something that they're not interested in because we don't want them to end up miserable. But to the extent that you have an interest in finance or economics and you think you may like teaching or research, exploring the PhD option, I think, is something good to do. Not only because you could set yourself up for a career in a university, but for me, the PhD in finance has opened up a lot of options. As we see, I went to the government and I went to Cornerstone, and there are other types of careers I could have entered with a PhD in finance. So I think, the challenge is definitely getting more women who are qualified for these positions, but then also within these institutions, trying to get a critical mass of women so that you really feel the difference. As I said, when I went to the SEC, I noticed the difference right away, and the same at Cornerstone. I don't have the answer to how we leapfrog from zero to that critical mass, but I think every year as we inch along, we get closer and closer to that.
Thank you. One of the things I'm really taking away from your comment is that there are so many opportunities, and I hope what we're doing at Tippie is exposing women to these opportunities. We're doing amazing things in the finance department on having women's leadership groups. But education and training opens doors. And so women can have incredibly successful careers, and there are opportunities for them. So thank you very much. I'm now going to turn to Ebony. And you spoke earlier in great detail about what drew you to STEM. And you're now, as you mentioned, almost done with your MBA program here at Tippie, where you really have dedicated a lot of your, if not all of your free time towards expanding your skill set. And one of the things I've heard you talk about in the past is making sure that you and other women have a seat at the table. So I'd like you to talk a little bit more about why you chose to expand your skill set beyond your science background, how you've been able to leverage these new skills in the last couple of years, and have there been real challenges, or was the challenge just getting started for you with the expanded skill sets?
Sure, Jen. So over the past decade or so, I'd say the agriculture industry has experienced a tremendous amount of change. And that change was something that was impactful to my life, my career, and that I just found myself being, at the time, very uncomfortable with. And so what I will acknowledge that I spent many years with my focus being solely on largely on the science and innovation side of things. And I really didn't spend a lot of time learning about our business. For example, how our strategy decisions are made on the commercial side of the business, or the external forces that impact our industry. So along the way, at one point, Corteva had provided a series called Understanding Our Business. And that was really hugely impactful for me, and understanding really what was going on outside the lab and external to R&D. So from there, I found myself really wanting to understand our business financials and our incredible global supply chain, and which was really what brought me to pursue my MBA with Tippie. In addition, I really wanted to improve my soft skills to be able to engage in business discussions in a meaningful way once I felt like I had earned myself a seat at the table. So since I started my PMBA program, I've really learned just so many skills that I've been able to really implement and use to benefit my career immediately. So I'm now able to follow the quarterly reports and our business performance, and I can appreciate how those numbers impact the future of our business. And really, I leveraged those leadership courses to learn how to speak up for myself and to engage a support system, just supporters, some of whom have become official mentors and sponsors. And I learned how to really freely share my goals and explain where I wanted to go without that fear that's always there of, for me anyway, of being just seen as a pushy woman. And I just learned to become vocal about my desires to move out of the lab. And I really wanted to get into program management, which would allow me to continue my journey as an individual contributor, which is where I think is a good fit for me, but to also leverage my scientific background and my just historical project knowledge with the business skills that I was learning in the evenings to make the career move that I wanted to make. There are also programs that are offered at Tippie that I took advantage of that really helped me to learn how to navigate those discussions, which can be difficult when you find yourself a lot of times as the only woman at the table. But in terms of challenges, there certainly were many along the way, which can be incredibly discouraging and frustrating. But I would say, if I'm honest with myself, that there was no challenge that was ever greater than my own doubting of my own talents and abilities. And I think as a woman, that can be rather common, especially in STEM fields, just because it can be isolating when there are not a lot of women around that you could see every day, that you can chat with. But once I was able to move and push beyond that and really just build my confidence, I found that I was able to identify, a support system and supporters who were willing to advocate for me and really assist me on my journey of where to get me to where I wanted to go.
Thank you. I think that's such a powerful message that, your biggest challenge was overcoming your own fear and pushing yourself. I've constantly seen you and other women pushing out of your comfort zone, whether that be, developing leadership skills or just asking for what you want. So gosh, that's very powerful. Thank you so much for that. Eden, I'm going to turn my attention back to you. In 2019, only 11% of fund managers were women. The number of funds have exploded over the last 2 decades, but the number of women entering the industry has stayed relatively static. And many of the firms that across the world are talking about being more diverse and inclusive. From your perspective, what are 1 or 2 things an organization could do to make a company more attractive to female or diverse candidates and retain those employees? And even thinking beyond the firm and building upon Ebony's great response, what do women need to do to advocate for themselves and build their networks?
No, that's a great question, and I actually have another statistic that I learned in the last couple of years at another panel at another conference over in London, which was only about 5 to 10% of heads of buy-side global trading desks are women. So you're talking about fund managers, a very small percentage of that being women, whereas women usually in a household control the budget and most of the consumer spending decisions. And so you really think about how does that really, equate with each other, whereas you have these super low numbers of women fund managers, women global leaders and traders in the finance industry. And how do we, sort of rectify that? And really, COVID has shed a huge light on this issue, right? And so even with those low of numbers and with, numbers increasing of women before COVID, pre-COVID, picking up and coming into the industry, we've had a massive exodus, I think, of women across many industries leaving the workforce. And I think that's been happening because it's really shed the light of the invisible work the women have to shoulder beyond their jobs and beyond their full-time responsibilities, whether that be as a primary caregiver or, domestic responsibilities of running the household, or when, daycare is closed, and at home help is no longer able to come anymore. Babysitters, nannies, where does that leave? The burden responsibility of the day-to-day, child rearing, and it falls on the women mostly. And so as organizations think about that, and that light has been shed on this sort of dynamic, that's, I think, where organizations can really step up and support women to keep them in the field, to keep them on the track. There's that phrase called the crystal ladder. We know about, the glass ceiling, but now there's the crystal ladder, where what is happening at middle level women, how are we coming into an industry 50% class women, 50% male, and then all of a sudden, as we go more and more senior, those numbers are becoming, much more unbalanced of, primarily males going and gaining seniority, while women are dropping out. And I think this is really one of the reasons why. So as long as organizations can offer that support, can really, change their way of thinking in terms of, the unconscious bias, or as, Ebony made some really, really great and profound points in terms of the pushy women, what we have to walk a fine line of being too pushy or aggressive, or not asking enough, whereas we still want to come across as strong, we can't come across as too strong, whereas men don't really have to think about that problem. And so with that, I think, just organizations offering that support system, really having those conversations. What can we do? It turns out remote working does work, especially in trading, where it's such a rigid structural mindset of what a trader should have been. Set hours, the market opens from here to here, physical location, everybody has to go to one physical trading floor. That's the only way that you can trade. It's the only way that it works. Well, that was completely blown out of the water with COVID. And I think that's one of the silver linings, and hopefully has opened the door to, opportunities where we can have a more diverse workforce, not just for women, but maybe also for, physically handicapped, people who weren't able to make the transportation to the physical, trading desk. It could open up a much more diverse set of candidates to be able to pull from. And I think it's something that has really been a positive outcome coming out of the finance industry and Wall Street through the COVID pandemic. So again, that's something I think that organizations can do. The one or two things is really think about flexible working arrangements, think about more flexibility in scheduling, and having that frame of reference on, the burdens that, in gender-wise, women may take on more than men, or some men may take on than women, whoever is the primary caregiver, but not just, make assumptions on just because you're a certain gender, you have, the same amount of responsibilities, just in general in the whole family life and work-life balance. So with that as well, the advocacy, again, Ebony made a great point, and that was confidence. I think sometimes we think about, we talk about the pool, we talk about the pipeline, we talk about, at the organization, we talk about building the pipeline all the way down to elementary school, because, elementary school, then you need to get them interested. So they're interested in middle school, and then in high school, and then they pick the right college, and that's where they're picking their vocations. But you're not going to have that pool if, there's these things that women, it seems, across all industries share in common, which is, the need to be absolutely perfect to be able to raise your hand to do something. And I see that over and over again. And I've seen that with so many people that I've mentored as well, in all different industries, where, a mentor of mine actually gave me this statistic, which I'm not sure how accurate it is, but he was a male. So I found this more interesting. He said, I find that women need to be 100% sure that they can do something to raise their hand and volunteer for it. Whereas men only need to be about 20, 30% sure, and they'll just go for it. And so that's where we need to get to, is we need to put ourselves forward. We're our own worst enemy sometimes, where we just don't put ourselves forward for something because we don't think we can do it absolutely perfectly. We're not sure if, we're right for it. And really we are. We can learn, just as well as our male counterparts, or even better, handle role and stress even better in some cases. And so with that, I just encourage, in terms of advocacy and advocating for yourself, it's a really hard skill set, I think, for some women, including myself, to learn. And it's something that I've had to learn. I mean, I think I haven't been very successful at it early on in my career, and I've had to learn that skill, and something I still have to work at every day. But it's really also something of trying to get over the fear and self-doubt in your own head. And I think they call that imposter syndrome, where you have to convince yourself that you belong there. But you do, and we all do. We all belong there. It's just that it's just one more barrier to entry that we create for ourselves. So with that, and how to advocate and build your own networks, that comes so naturally to men, it's, just ignoring that self-doubt, just going for it. Because another great piece of advice, again, another male mentor, sponsor gave me this advice. And he said, I don't know why you're worrying about this even. Like, just go do it and make them say no to your face. And that was just a light bulb moment for me, was, yeah, you're right. I guess, I mean, if I don't ask, the answer is no anyways. So if I make them say no to my face, then at least I have a little more information as to why the answer was no. But we get too scared sometimes to put ourselves forward, again, because we don't want to seem like a pushy, aggressive female, or, maybe we are afraid of that confrontation or that conversation. And I find that, having those conversations and doing the steps that it takes to put you out of your comfort zone, I think, as you had said, every single time I've done that has absolutely reaped the rewards. And so I encourage, again, young women, young prospective women that are already in their careers to absolutely, advocate for yourself, push yourself out of your comfort zone, and make them say no to your face.
That's really great advice. And you talked about, having to practice and learn it. And it's a constant learning process throughout your entire career. But Eden, before I move on to the next question, I think what I also heard from your answer is you've practiced this and you're good at this. And so while it still is maybe outside of your comfort zone, it's not as scary as it used to be. And you're very confident in advocating for yourself. Am I summarizing that?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, but that's with practice. The first couple of times, after you do it, it's like muscle memory. And so you're 100% right. But it's going to be a self-practice, I know, for the rest of my career.
Yes.
And hopefully we'll get easier and easier with the rest of my career.
Yeah, I like that the advocating for yourself, developing that muscle memory to do that. That's another great takeaway. So thank you for that. I'm going to turn back now to Jennifer. And we've been quoting a number of statistics that are somewhat bleak. But as you noted earlier, that there are some really wonderful things that are happening as well. So companies with at least 30% of women in management have enjoyed higher subsequent one-year returns on equity since 2010. The pool of women seeking a charter from the CFA Institute has risen to 32% of all candidates compared to 26% in 2015. So in my last question to you, I really focused on what are the challenges that women face, but now I'd kind of like to shift the perspective on that. And can you highlight some of the real strengths that women have, and how can we highlight and leverage these strengths in our careers?
Yeah, those are great questions. So I think there are a lot of strengths that women have that I won't necessarily highlight here, but similar to men, creative, talented, we work hard. So just in thinking about strengths that I tend to see across many women, one would be women are very good communicators. And when it comes to pitching, trying to pitch business to clients, in my field, explaining economics to non-economists, which I've had to do throughout my career, as have many of my female colleagues at the institutions I've been at, I see that women have a real strength in doing that, just taking those building blocks of complicated concepts and putting them into simpler capsules that people who don't have that technical background can understand. So I think I'd like to start with communication. I think that women are also tend to have a lot of strengths as managers. And this can be a bit of a double-edged sword, because I think given that women are good managers, sometimes they may be taken out of a role of the day-to-day research and maybe doing more administrative type tasks as a manager. So I think you want to be careful with those managerial assignments that you accept and make sure that they still allow you to hone your skill set and to push your knowledge forward in your field. But assuming that your managerial role allows you to keep doing that, I think that women listen well to their employees. They recognize when an issue is actually a problem, and they're willing to roll up their sleeves, even if it's kind of a messy situation, and try to work towards a solution. Not that men don't have those attributes as well, but I really see that in common across many of the women that I've worked with in my career. And then I'd also like to add flexibility. I think that women, if one path is not working, we're really pretty cheerful about trying another path and doing that again and again until we get to the solution. I don't see a lot of kind of dogmatic personalities. So not only the flexibility within your institution to solve problems, but I also see women being more flexible about their careers. I noted that when I was studying for my PhD, I thought I'm going to be an academic and that's what I'm going to do for life. And when, after a few years as an academic, I started to think, I have some other interests. I think I might like to try applying finance to real world situations. And because I had the training and the options, I was able to do that. So I think both within the institution, a focus on flexibility to solve problems, but also in thinking about your career, maybe the flexibility to switch to something else, still STEM related, still challenging, but something that could be a little bit more satisfying to you. Don't be afraid to do that. And then I wanted to build on a couple of things that Ebony and Eden noted. So the perfectionism, I do think that's something that women have to get past. I mean, I struggle with this myself. There is some research on this as well, that female students will leave certain fields if they're not getting straight A's or close to straight A's, more so than male students will switch out of those fields. Getting a few B's is okay. Some fields may be incredibly lucrative, and women may switch out of that because they're not getting straight A's. I'm not sure that's the right choice. If you're considering the net present value of that decision today, it may be better to take a few B's and get that higher paying job. So perfectionism is definitely something to work on. And then I think also the ability to take criticism. I think one of the strengths of women is how supportive we are of each other and our colleagues, and we're great cheerleaders. But I think we also need to hone the ability to take criticism because it's necessary for moving forward. And it may just not come natural given that we're so supportive, I think, in general. And for my field of going into academia, as Jen knows, we're pretty much subject to criticism from day one. We conduct research, we have to get up in front of many people and present our research, who then bombard us with questions. We present at conferences, and then they assign someone to get up and critique the paper. So I think, as Eden said, this is sort of the ability to take criticism has come over many years of that's how our field is set up. So I think that's an important skill to learn too. That doesn't mean that the field is always great at giving criticism. So I'm not giving the field a free pass on that. Criticism should be given constructively, but that's an important skill to learn to be able to really push your knowledge and hone your experience.
Thank you. Many of these traits, strengths and areas to think about really resonate with me on a personal level. So I like framing it in a way to think about, how do you leverage your strengths and overcome areas where that perfectionist might come into play, which also made me think, the perfectionist and receiving critical feedback, that almost attacks that professional perfectionist mentality, but absolutely it is 100% a way to grow. So thank you for really pointing that out. Ebony, I'm going to turn back to you. You had talked about, actually, both you and Eden have talked about mentors and advocates, men and women. But research has found that girls in particular have fewer role models to inspire interest in their fields, seeing limited examples of female scientists and engineers in books, media, and popular culture. Even fewer role models of Black women in math and science. Women struggle often in their careers to find role models like themselves. So it sounds like you've had, but many of you have had the opportunity to find role models, but finding role models like themselves. And these mentors are frequently needed to encourage and support women as they progress in really, really challenging fields like you are all in. So throughout your career, Ebony, have there been individuals who have been helpful in your advancement and development? And you talked about this is even stemming from your childhood and finding someone that really resonated you with their accomplishments. And then I want to follow that up as you talk about people that have advocated for you and mentored you. If you don't readily see a mentor, what do you do? Do you sit back and do nothing, or is there something that we need to do as women in developing these networks and skill sets?
So sure, Jen, I feel like a lot to unpack there. I do have personal mentors who've helped to shape me to become the woman I've become. I feel really fortunate. I'm going to give a shout out to my family, but I feel really fortunate. I came from a family of really strong women who've, supported my aspirations. And that support has been just completely unwavering, but in a professional and career shaping context, I'd say that one of my first mentors was my high school AP biology teacher. And she's really just a prime example of why I believe that representation matters, because she allowed me to see that contrary to the popular messaging of that time, Black girls really can do science. And that meant a lot to me. She was at the high school level, and but she helped me to see that, this was a career path that I could pursue if I wanted to, and was there to give me that support to help guide me, to help me to see what that could possibly look like for me. And then once I transitioned over and I entered the University of Maryland, I was inspired immensely by the assistant dean of the College of Life Sciences, and her name was Dr. Lisa Bradley. She was a veterinarian by trade, and she was really just instrumental in helping me to navigate that undergraduate journey, which I found to be pretty difficult, through her just encouragement and mentorship. Because while I was in that program, I did not see a lot of people that looked like me, and I was unsure of myself, as I mentioned earlier, and she really just helped to guide me and let me know that I could do it. And I believed her when she told me that I could, and when she challenged me to do it. And so one thing I would say that I learned along the way, which Eden really just so brilliantly touched on earlier, is in terms of mentors and advocates, don't discount the contributions of male advocates. We're here on this women's panel talking about women in STEM, but oftentimes, especially in STEM fields, men are the ones who occupy those leadership roles, and they're the ones who have the access to be able to advocate for you when you're not in the room, right? So, on a more personal note, I was nominated and supported for my recent BEA Award by a male laureate scientist at Corteva. So, really just don't discount the power of, having both male and female advocates. And in terms of advice, I would say that if you don't readily see a mentor, get aggressive, seek one out aggressively, whether you see one or not, and to do that, you should pay attention to, subtle signs, and that should help. Are there like women and men in your organization who support women's causes? Look for that. Are there any that actively promote diversity in STEM? Are they vocal about this? Are there any men who show up to events that are sponsored by your organization's women's network? And are they participating in activities that support women's causes and that are promoted by the Women's Network? You should look for people who want to engage and who want to help you to maximize your value. And when you find those people, be bold. I'd say speak up, speak out, ask for some of their time, grab a coffee with them, and you should be able to ascertain pretty quickly whether this person is willing to take, if they do take an interest in you, and if they're willing to introduce you maybe to other people in their network who want to help you to sow the seeds of your success. And as Jennifer mentioned earlier, I'd say that you should be careful. You're developing these relationships and they can be influential, but be careful where you allow yourself to be moved. Just like Jennifer said earlier, because only you're the person who knows where your true strengths lie, and so you have to stay true to that and accept roles that are going to benefit you and help you grow in the ways that you want to grow. And I would say that once you do find a good mentor, it's important to remember that that's not a one-sided relationship. So I think it's important for you to consider the ways in which you can help a mentor to grow in their careers as well, so that they can continue to reap the benefits of the relationship that you've started. And although their growth will be in different ways, right? So figure out ways that you can help your mentor or advocate grow as leaders through their support of you. That's my advice.
Oh, just wonderful, wonderful advice. And, I think it's important, especially as you were talking about your AP biology teacher or your mentor at the University of Maryland, that that we then become mentors to women or men or whoever is really seeking growth. And so I very much appreciate your insights in that regard. So I'm going to now turn my attention to Ebony. And I don't know if our audience knows it, but Ebony has a new baby. So congratulations on your new baby. Did you shake your head?
Eden.
Oh, Eden, yes. Ebony, you didn't have a baby that you didn't know about? All right. So Eden, yes, I apologize. Yes, Eden had the baby. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And I know one of the areas that you're passionate about is making sure that women understand they can have a successful career and pursue other passions outside of work. So can you talk about your decision to have a baby and how did you prepare for this as much as one can prepare at all? And what advice can you really offer women, moving forward? And I think you had mentioned you're actually still on maternity leave at this point.
No, that's right. And it's always something, I think we've heard it throughout this entire panel of the lack of women at senior level positions, when we were coming up the ranks. And it shouldn't have to be, even now, it shouldn't have to be a decision of, being a good mother versus being a good, worker or being a good, colleague. It really should be something where we're able to balance it. And that's one thing that's been really important to me in terms of, having my daughter, in December, especially during the pandemic, has been really quite frightening. But at the same time, it's things that you have to roll with. And I would not recommend to anyone to do what I did during my pregnancy, which was move twice, renovate a house, work full time, and then have to attend, all the doctor's appointments by yourself because of all the COVID protocols and restrictions going on. But at that time too, at the same time as I was going through the pregnancy, and even after while I'm on maternity leave, I do think a lot about this, and I can see how women would leave their fields, their respective fields, because of the pressure of, can I do it all? I can't, juggle this and that, and how am I going to be able to be there for my family and my child, whereas, and give the full 100% effort that I do to work. And I think it's really a case of balance. And I think if we deploy a lot of the wisdom that we heard from Ebony and Jennifer and yourself in thinking of advocating, setting that foundation for finding sponsors and mentors. And now that's something very important, I want to make a differentiation of, as Ebony was speaking, I thought she had some excellent points, advocates, mentors. And then one thing I would add in there is sponsors, because sponsors is really someone, after a certain point in your career is what you really need to seek out to be able to have that support at the upper ranks of your firm, so that you can continue to push through, again, the crystal ladder, the glass ceiling, and having those people in your corner, the people that you're providing value to, who can also advocate for you back, is really important during life-changing events like this, like having a child, or when your time changes a little bit more. I think also what was important into setting me up for success for this transition as well was a lot of executive coaching. Again, it's a constant self-reflection of self-improvement, self-advocacy, but again, also getting feedback from resources like executive coaches, or your network of women and support system of women who you can reach out to, and they're at the same sort of points in your career, and they can give you the advice. They probably have been through those situations before. And so having that network that men do inherently have, or naturally have, is really important for women, especially senior women, and especially senior women going through life changes such as this one. And so I would say all of those things together that really helped me set me up for success, to know that, throughout this all, I can absolutely come back to work, be 100% at work, but still be able to, juggle, be a good mom, enjoy my new baby, and really have that time and those boundaries set through work and life. And I really have that, again, through the network that was set, through executive coaching, that really helped me to not say yes to everything. I think part of being a woman is you feel as if you have to take care of everyone and everything, whether it be at work and at home. But when you think about things, the time of the day is still the same. It's always static. It's always 24 hours. And so now we just have to be more thoughtful about how we spend that time. And so really what I'm finding is really evaluating my life on a regular basis. And a piece of advice I got from a manager, again, another male, back from the early days, that I always took with me, which was celebrate every success in life, or celebrate every life change by outsourcing something that doesn't bring you joy. And I've always done that, and it's always proved to be one of the best pieces of advice I've ever had. And so now that I think that I have even less time, because obviously children take up quite a bit of time, I think to myself, okay, let's think about all the things that don't bring me joy, dishes, or whatever it is, household responsibilities, or, writing Christmas cards. I don't even know, whatever it is, what can we do to outsource that, so we can really focus our time and our energy on the high value, high priority items, and just be better and more physically there, both for our families, for our colleagues, and just be present.
Really wonderful advice. I am going to take that advice on outsourcing things that I don't like, and I'm going to use that with my family, saying I outsourced it.
Exactly.
Very wonderful. All right. Well, now we have a little bit of time to turn our attention to some of the questions from our audience. And so I'm going to encourage the audience to use the Q&A button to enter questions in there. And I'll try to pull those out and get to as many as we possibly can. At one point, we had talked about feedback and constructive criticism. So one of our attendees would like to know, do you have advice for giving feedback that is constructive criticism? Giving it to a female direct report, as an example, it can be taken really negatively. So what tips do you have for giving feedback and constructive criticism?
I can start. I think this is tough for anybody, no matter who you are. And like a lot of things, it can get better with practice. And I don't mean necessarily live practice, giving negative feedback to as many people as you can, but practicing with a colleague the feedback you plan to give to the direct report. And there's a whole management industry around this as well. So if you want to dive deep into articles and advice columns about how to give negative feedback, you will read a lot of potential options from the sandwich method, whether that works, of putting the negative in between two positives, or some other types of methods. I'm not sure that there's any one winner, because I think that management can be very unique, not only to the style of the manager, but you may manage some of your employees differently as well, given their personalities and the way you approach feedback. So it's important to understand how this person may receive it, what thoughts they may be bringing to the conversation. And the one thing really that I've found to work is be direct, be constructive, and practice ahead of time and get that feedback yourself before you go into the situation. But I've had times where I've given feedback and it's maybe not been direct enough. And so the person just didn't get it. And that only creates problems down the road. So be direct, but be constructive.
Thank you. I think really great advice. Eden, did you have something more to add?
I would just say in terms of feedback, especially, in my field in trading, I think it's something where, open, honest communication, as Jennifer indicated, has to be direct. It has to be actionable. I am a fan of the compliment sandwich, at times. I think that's a good way to give it. But at the same time, I think, if you're giving feedback, you have to be open to receiving feedback as well, criticism, both positive and negative. So it's really something too, in terms of feedback, where I set up with the team, that I manage, real-time feedback is important. That way it's not a situation where someone is, thinking they're doing, something fine, and all of a sudden mid-year or year-end, that's when the feedback kind of hits them. I don't think that's something that's very constructive, for their growth or for their trajectory. You have to give them an opportunity to be able to take action on that feedback. And so, in terms of setting the standards of a team and really just communicating to them, okay, team, two-way real-time feedback, me to you, you to me, and having that open dialogue is really kind of sets the tone of that feedback being taken a little more constructively, I think, than maybe, sort of getting blindsided by it, at certain periods of time when feedback is, I guess you could say, required, throughout the compensation cycle.
Very good. Thank you. Not a question, but one of the comments that I'm reading in the chat is an appreciation for hearing all of you talk about practicing these skill sets. So that's really resonating with the audience. One of my favorite stories, as a very quick aside, from being here at Tippie in the MBA program, is one year we had a group of female MBA students who took a training on salary negotiation and on their own got together by themselves outside of the training and would practice negotiating for their salary in preparation for their interviews and follow-on negotiations. And that year was the first year that we had our female students have a higher average starting salary than our male students. So I think that's just an amazing story. I'm going to turn to another question. How do you respond to teammates or coworkers who are men who push you not to lead projects? Or have you been in a position where you've been told to take notes instead of leading? So how would you as a woman respond to that? What's advice that we can give our audience? Eden, go ahead.
Sorry, I was hitting the wrong button. Yes, so I think you can say that's probably happened to all of us, but maybe I'm speaking out of turn. But in those cases, especially in a field like mine, you have to be just as direct back and say, would you ask, him over there to do that? No, then why are you asking me? So I think it's something that absolutely, I think it happens because, again, I think there's a strong unconscious bias. Might not be deliberate, might just be the unconscious bias of what women's roles are, or as Jennifer had said, because of some of our skill sets and the traits that women have that make us great managers, maybe more administrative, type tasks are assigned to us. And I think what we have to do as women is really think to ourselves, if I accept this responsibility, is it going to advance me in my career? If the answer is no, then don't accept it. Be choosy in what it is that you're saying yes to. You know, don't just be a team player. Make sure that you're setting yourself up to be looked at as a serious competitor for that next leadership role or for that next position. And so to answer your question, that has happened before, and I'm just as direct back in saying no, I won't do that. But you can find someone. I bet he would do it over there. He has great better handwriting.
Wonderful. Ebony.
Absolutely. I agree with Eden's comments wholeheartedly. I think whether it's the correct answer or not, my response and my advice is to absolutely speak up, be bold, and push back, because once you do take on that responsibility, it becomes, especially because, as Jennifer said, we're good at this, it becomes your responsibility. And if that's not where you see yourself and your career wanting to go, then, you know, push back. And I have found that, you know, I can be invited to, had in the past been invited to meetings and found that, yes, I was invited there so that there would be someone who is really efficient at taking notes. And that's not how this is going to go. And the only way that you're going to prevent that from happening in the future, or to stop it in its tracks when it does happen to you, is to be vocal about that. And I know as women, sometimes we do struggle with speaking up for ourselves, but you just have to find that voice where you say, you know, I really liked what Eden said, you know, his handwriting is better than mine. I hadn't thought about that, but you know, you just have to find a constructive way to, without damaging yourself in any way, to push back and say that's not something that I'm willing to do.
Great advice. And Jennifer, you've unmuted.
Yes, I was just going to say, I've heard this advice given. Maybe don't be so good at some things. It's a little bit similar to what Eden said. Maybe don't be the best note taker in the room from day one, or the best at managing some administrative task, even though you could be. Just a thought.
Very good. I like this question. What is your advice or suggestions for your male colleagues? Especially as one of our panelists talked about, you know, well, many of you talked about having male advocates, but is there advice that we could offer men who are willing to step in and be advocates for women? What would be helpful for a male colleague to do to help us in the workplace?
Well, I think I can start, although I'd love to hear Ebony and Eden's views as well. We've heard over and over that men have been great mentors and helped guide the careers of us. Certainly there were only men to guide me when I started in my PhD program, and I thank them for that. So I think continuing to really be good mentors, to look around and see, are you currently mentoring a woman? And it doesn't have to be a formal pairing, mentor mentee. In fact, I think it's better for your career if you're getting advice and mentorship from many different people through informal relationships and coffees. So, you know, some firms, they have random matching of, and these days it's over Zoom, but of coffee chats where you're randomly assigned to someone for a 30-minute coffee chat. And that proceeds for a few weeks or a few months until people get to meet with each person. And that can be a way to break the ice without the man having to go out and say, okay, you know, I'm gonna talk to 2 women today. I think that the coffee chat is a nice, you know, not an intrusive way to do that. So a mentorship, I think, is the key.
Thank you. Eden, you've unmuted.
I would have to say that one of the best things a male colleague has ever done for me was to let me know how much he was compensated. And why that was so powerful was because it allowed me to see the difference in compensation for people doing similar roles. And so, you know, it's something I think we all tend to shy away from, is having those open discussions about, you know, comp and promotion and those kind of discussions. But when we talk about a gender pay gap, when we talk about women, in roles getting paid less, I think that's always just a really important, and it doesn't have to be like, I make this X much, but it could be something about ballpark ranges around here to here. And that way that really helps women, go into their salary negotiations, go into job interviews, go into, all of these different discussions with information that could help them, really close that pay gap. And I think that's something, again, when I think about male colleagues, especially more senior male colleagues, giving them that guidance of, how to close those pay gaps, how to have those conversations that I think, again, through their natural networks that they have with each other that sometimes get discussed maybe, among the male colleagues, women may not be having those conversations with each other or with their male colleagues. So that may be something in discussion that, yes, it's uncomfortable, but it can be incredibly powerful, especially in the current times where we're really seeking to close those gender pay gaps.
Ebony, you've unmuted.
Yep, I just wanted to quickly add that, I think it's very important to recognize and, just be aware of the fact that not all men want to help, and they're entitled to that. So, in terms of advice, if you're looking to help and make a change, don't be that guy, don't be the person who actually takes on a mentee or a relationship that he thinks can help to benefit his career, but he's not actively being a good mentor, a good role model, so if you're going to take on the initiative, if you're going to take on a mentee, lean into that and make sure that you're giving her the best advice and the best advocacy that you can. And when you are, or when you are looking for someone who genuinely wants to be a mentor, look for those subtle signs, because it's not always, the loudest person in the room. It's the person whose actions are showing that they want to help women advance in their career.
Thank you very much. All right, I am looking at the time, and while I could ask this panel questions for hours and hours, I'm going to actually ask us to go around and just give some closing remarks. So even if you don't mind me starting with you, what are the key takeaways that you would really like us to walk away with from this webinar?
And thank you. And I think we've all said it, so it's not really my key takeaways, but I mean, and key takeaways that I've seen, and it's really been refreshing to see that it's across, all industries, and so that we have that commonality. But it's raise your hand for that stretch assignment, have the confidence, have the courage. I like how Ebony put it, be bold, go forward, make them say no to your face. I think that's something that we all need to really, as women, structurally get over in terms of, being able to put ourselves out there and being able to put ourselves on equal footing with our male counterparts, and I think you said it, seek to get out of your comfort zone. If you're comfortable, then you're not learning and you're not growing. And so always seek opportunities and always seek, situations where you are not comfortable, where you have that sense of, anxiety, because those are the things where you practice your self-advocacy, your self-coaching. And then you get over that hurdle, and then you find that it becomes easier and easier and easier as time goes on. And then you find the next thing that's going to scare you. So I guess always look for things that scare you. Find your village of women, strong, driven women, and men as well. People that are going to support you, people that are going to grow with you, people that are going to cheer for you and not just advocate for you, but they're going to offer you advice, because, as women, sometimes we tend to be too negative on ourselves, but we're so positive on everybody else. And so if you have that support group of strong women, that are supporting each other, then you guys are sort of each other's cheerleaders. And I think lastly, it's, as you become more successful, make sure that you're pulling as many women up with you as possible. As we've heard from this panel, we are not seeing enough women leadership. I think, at Cornerstone especially, it's amazing that, it's that level and percentage of women, founders, being women, that's something that we should, see emulated across the entire industry. But we're not going to get there until we, pull each other up as we all become more successful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Great takeaways. Ebony, could I turn to you? what would you like us to walk away with?
I would say that the key message I would like for people to walk away with is that it's important as women for us to find our passion and to use our voice to fight for it. In an environment where combating roadblocks and discouragement can be the norm, just be bold and become the change agent. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. Speak up, find people to support and uplift you on your journey. And cultivate relationships with people who will advocate for you when you're not in the room, because really they're going to be the ones who will be able to get you a seat at the table. When you find your mentors, appreciate them, let them know, let it be a two-way symbiotic relationship where both parties benefit. And also, while you're building your networks and securing your mentors and advocates and sponsors, don't forget to reach out to the next generation of women to help them find their voice. And lastly, I would say, make sure you pay it forward and help someone else. Be compassionate and considerate of other minority communities who might struggle. Their struggle may look different than yours, but we're often always battling the same challenges, just the same as you are. And I say, lastly, just be kind to each other. It's hard enough out here without us having each other's back.
Wonderful, thank you. Jennifer, can I ask you to do the final round of takeaways?
Sure. And Ebony and Eden have already given great closing remarks, so I echo all of that. I guess picking out a couple of pieces as final takeaways: really invest in yourself, your knowledge, what you need to do to help further your career, and invest time in thinking about how to get there. Women tend to be pulled in a lot of different directions. Simple things: calendar time to think about, do you have the training you want to get to the next level? Do you have the network that you need to get to the next level? And make concrete plans for how to do that. So investing in yourself, priority number one. And then I would like to say again, as Ebony just noted, really don't be discouraged. So I know that obviously I benefited from women in decades prior who really had made big advancements in careers and in corporations. And I so appreciate that. But even today, new people entering the field, if they, these STEM fields, if they look around and say, oh, there's only 3 women in my academic department. 20 years ago, there were 0. So it looks like not enough, but it's so different from what it was. And so please don't get discouraged. There are a lot of good things happening. And as Ebony and Eden said, you're a part of that change. Invest in yourself, bring others up with you. And should you find yourself in a situation that just doesn't seem like it is the right one and that it can be changed, leave. There's so many organizations out there that want you and that will be a wonderful environment for you. So don't be afraid of change.
Thank you. I really want to thank our panel for just incredible insights, and I am leaving inspired to excel in my career and to help women around me. So many thanks for your time and expertise and giving back to our Tippie community. Barb, I'd like to turn it over to you to wrap up with any final notes.
That is great. Thank you, Jen. I totally agree with you. An impressive panel. Really great insights. I think lots of takeaways that we can all kind of think about and apply to our own lives. So Eden, Ebony, Jennifer, thank you so much for agreeing to participate in our panel. Jen Blackhurst, thank you for moderating. Thank you for taking the time, developing our questions. It's been great. And to our participants, I want to thank you for logging in, for providing your questions, and make sure that you join us for some of our future events. I do want to remind you, we have recorded this, and so in a couple of days, we'll be able to send out a link for our YouTube video. But in addition, immediately after this, you'll see an email from Zoom with a very short questionnaire, just a quick survey where you can let us know what you thought of today's event. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and hopefully everyone stays safe, enjoy the spring, and as always, go Hawks.